Hello and welcome to this special broadcast on DD India. I'm Gautam Roy. How to ensure that artificial intelligence, which is a tech revolution in the making and supposed to be as revolutionary as the internet or the atomic bomb, remains holistic, ethical, fair and transparent, along with being safe and growing at the same time, is a global concern. India is in the process of coming up with its own AI law as well as large language models. It's in mission mode on that particular front, apart from coming up with advanced AI tools. And the European Union has been a global pioneer in coming up with an AI law. And we have the good fortune of having with us one of its architects. We have Mr. Michael Mcnamara with us. He's a member of the European Parliament, as well as the European Parliament's AI Working Group co-chair. Welcome to DD, Mr. Mcnamara. Now, before we get all down and dirty about AI, just tell us what brings you to India this time around.
Well, I'm here for the Digital News Publishers Association conclave on AI, where they're looking at AI, the impact it will have on digital news publishing here in India. I'm very much looking forward to hearing the Indian perspective on that. It's obviously something that every country, as you said, is grappling with across the world, the European Union, its member states, as well as, of course, India. And India is, of course, assuming a leadership role in the world in that regard, as we saw at the Paris summit just a couple of weeks ago.
Yes. And what sort of specific challenges does news face where AI is concerned, and how can, what kind of things are being worked out to ensure that these are tackled?
Well, I mean, obviously AI-generated news is a big issue. People at the moment, I think, trust news sources because of who works in them, individual journalists that they place their trust in. If it's being generated by AI, then people may or may not trust it more. There's also, of course, major issues around labour rights and how many journalists will be required, whether journalists will become redundant. I mean, undoubtedly AI offers huge benefits, particularly in sifting through large amounts of data. In the European Union context, the AI Act would require that AI-generated content be labelled as such, and even images that, if they're AI-generated, they would be labelled as that. They're not in any way not allowed. They are, of course, completely allowed, but they have to be labelled so that people know that they're dealing with AI-generated content as opposed to news content that's generated by humans with a track record that they might trust in.
And AI requires data as well, so it becomes an issue of copyright as well for the conventional media, even all mainstream and other media as well, which already exists.
Yeah, I mean, the issue of copyright is an issue right across the world. There are court cases ongoing here in India that I'm aware of, and I look forward to learning more about those cases, the issues that are being probed in those cases. There are court cases in North America, and a code of conduct is being elaborated now by the European Commission. It has co-chairs and experts who are completely independent of the Commission. They're primarily from civil society and academia, working on those, getting submissions from the industry, but also from other bodies, including bodies that represent copyright holders. And how to strike that balance is indeed a major bone of contention at the moment, and indeed quite a difficult issue in the negotiation of the Code of Conduct, from what I've been told.
Mm-hmm. And what do you make of how India is dealing with the AI landscape right now? It has an AI mission, so it wants to develop AI to the kind of advantages that it can deliver, and also at the same time, it is in the process of working out an AI law.
Yeah, I mean, again, there are various approaches. J.D. Vance, the American president, indicated that he didn't believe that any regulation was beneficial, that regulation could only hinder the development of this, that this is something that should be allowed to develop unhindered by regulation. The European approach has been different. I mean, it is accepting the many benefits that AI offers, that it's currently offering its competitors in the world stage. For example, AI is used across a large number of industrial processes in China at the moment. It offers competitive advantages. It's used heavily in the United States, albeit maybe less than China, but a lot more than Europe, where it's only used by, depending on which source you believe, 13 or 18% of companies and respondents are using AI at the moment, which is much lower. It's a matter for India it's a sovereign decision for India to determine which which approach it takes, whether it takes the regulation-free model or believes that there are risks inherent in AI and that they need to be mitigated and society needs to be protected from those. The Indian government did sign up to the declaration that accompanied the AI summit in Paris, as did the Chinese government, it must be acknowledged. The United States didn't, and neither did the United Kingdom, which came as perhaps maybe more of a surprise than the United States.
Yeah, that's true. Now, keeping all these factors in mind and the circumstances, is it just about the approach or also the circumstances that exist which should sort of inform India in framing its own AI law? Because there is, of course, the European Act now law to consider, but circumstances for India are different from Europe, aren't they?
Well, of course, I mean, our societies we share a lot of values in common. We share a certain amount of history in common. I mean, I'm Irish, you're Indian, we use the common law, we use the English language. It's not the only language of either of our states, but we have a lot in common. But of course, there are differences, but that's why it is a matter for the Indian legislature, which is the biggest democracy in the world, to determine the approach that it will take and the approach that fits India. But of course, that there are differences. I mean, there are also differences around the approach, for example, to facial recognition technology, to biometric data and all of that has informed the European regulatory framework. India may well take a different approach.
Mm-hmm. But what sort of an approach would you advocate, considering that we need to make the best of AI, at the same time avoid its pitfalls, doomsday scenarios, job losses, and other issues that might crop up?
Well, existential risk as well. I mean, I'd be very slow to give advice to a country of this size and magnitude and economic force of India, but I think I say what I think is beneficial in the European model, in the European context, is at least looking to mitigate risk, looking to ensure that the worst risk is mitigated, but also ensuring that regulatory burden falls on large developers who have the economic ability to sustain that, rather than SMEs. I mean, there is a concerted effort in Europe to ensure that a regulatory burden doesn't fall on SMEs, that it's simplified, and that this is not something that small and medium enterprises have to worry about, that this is something for the large-scale developers who are spending hundreds of billions of euros developing their models at the moment.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the AI Action Summit which happened in Paris, which India co-chaired, in fact, and there you mentioned the statement which was signed by all the countries, although the US and the UK did not really endorse it. Why do you think that happened, and what does that tell us as to which way is the world moving where an attitude towards AI is concerned?
Well, I mean, in the case of the United States, it was very clear why it didn't sign it. I mean, J.D. Vance gave a very clear statement on the matter. He just doesn't believe in regulation in this field, doesn't believe it needs regulation, believes that we need to get on with the business of innovating, and that the companies will deal with risks. The British decision, I think, was a little bit more of a surprise to some, certainly because it wasn't really clear what the new British government's approach was going to be. I mean, Rishi Sunak's government had obviously a lot of work done on AI safety.
AI Action Summit.
They did. Very clear about the need to develop AI in the United Kingdom, to use it to its economic advantage, but also very clear about the risks that are inherent in AI and the necessity to regulate against and mitigate those risks. The new government seems to have taken a different approach.
Now, while China was on board with the statement which called for inclusive and sustainable AI, also open AI, again, US and UK did not sign the statement. Do you feel China will play by the rules that it seems to be saying and norms that it seems to be saying that it will adhere to? Because it still remains a concern whether China has, as in the past, whether it will do what it says in public.
I certainly hope it will. I mean, all you can do is take somebody at their word, and until such time as they don't adhere to their word, you have to act in good faith. You have to act in good faith and believe that they are also acting in good faith. I mean, they have been quite categorical about what they intend to do. So all one can do is hope they're going to adhere to that. I mean, I am aware of allegations, for example, between American-based corporations with regard to the DeepSeek developers.
J.D. Vance was again very suggestive about it in Paris.
Yes, he was.
He mentioned authoritarian regimes.
Yes, but I mean that goes, I think, above and beyond sort of commercial interest to what ends you put the AI to. I mean, as I say, the issue of facial recognition technology, use of biometric data, all of that is very heavily circumscribed in the European legislation, because we take a very particular approach to that, to the idea of a big brother state that's constantly monitoring its citizens. The Chinese government's approach is very different on these issues, as we saw, for example, in how it dealt with various protests in the past number of years. And India will undoubtedly chart its own course in this regard, but has taken an approach which is much closer to the Western approach with regard to civil liberties.
But would you say, with what's happened in recent weeks, particularly in Paris, that Europe and India have been forced to join a sort of a global race where China and the US have been competing very, very intensely, and that is sort of loosening the reins or the thought process on how AI should be moved forward?
Well, I think clearly there is a race in place between, there's a race going on now between the United States and China. Obviously there's scope for cooperation between India and Europe, but as regards loosening the reins, I mean, Europe is getting on with implementing the AI Act while looking to develop innovation, while looking to develop its AI capacity, while looking to increase its compute capacity, of course.
And the two can happen at the same time?
I believe they can. I mean, I believe that there's much focus on regulation in Europe being a problem. Undoubtedly, in general terms, across industry, regulation and over-regulation is a problem. We need to simplify it. But I mean, in the AI context, I think the AI Act will prove to be less of a regulatory burden than many fear. I think many are basing their fears on the experience of GDPR. In particular, some of the large American data companies have a very negative experience of fragmentation in that regard in Europe, where we've the law being applied somewhat differently in the various member states, and indeed in some federal states within Europe being applied even differently within the states in that federation. I don't think that will be, I think Europe has learned its lesson in that regard. I think that won't be the approach. And I do think that there's a need for some regulation with regard to risks of models developing autonomy, for example, and also, I suppose, people being able to access information about developing bioweapons, etc.
And what's also become noticeable is the growing concern over the kind of energy that AI needs and the infrastructure that it has, already using up to 2% of the global energy that is generated, and could go up to 3% by 2030. So do you think in the long run AI will remain sustainable? Right now, of course, there are questions about its sustainability even as of the day.
That remains to be seen. I mean, that is undoubtedly a challenge for the large language models in the United States that are being developed. I mean, we've seen corporations acquiring nuclear power plants. We've seen plans to develop smaller nuclear reactors. Energy in general terms is a huge issue in Europe. Lack of energy independence across Europe is being one of the knock-on effects of the conflict in Ukraine. I think you mentioned 2-3%. I mean, I think their figures are far higher in some European member states. You're looking at getting well over 10% in the near future. France, I suppose, has nuclear power. That's part of its competitive advantage. I live between Ireland and Brussels. A nuclear power plant in Belgium was shut down just, I think, in last week, or if not, then the week before. In Germany, of course, has decommissioned its nuclear power plants. So where the energy is going to come from. But also, I mean, there is a debate, I think, in the scientific community among the computer scientists, mathematicians, statisticians that are developing models as to whether these large models are the only way forward, or whether smaller, more localized models can also play a part, which would require a lot less energy. And I suppose that's part of the market's response to DeepSeek was the fact that it was developed much more cheaply and seems to be less energy hungry than some of its American competitors in the training of it.
So the way one looks at it right now, it seems that the world is diverging in how to tackle AI, how to take it forward. But do you see a future where circumstances will ensure that the world has to come together to take AI forward, because otherwise it may become a bit of too much of a challenge?
Well, certainly. I mean, if it continues to develop at the speed that it's developing at the moment, there is the possibility of catastrophic risk. I mean, that you have autonomous models that are acting autonomously of human intervention, or that there's the ability to develop, as I mentioned earlier, such bioweapons, etc. I think that undoubtedly poses a problem beyond frontiers. But there's also the energy question. I mean, how is that going to be met? I mean, in the European context, I say Europe is not. Very few countries in Europe are energy self-sufficient. That's going to pose a huge challenge for those societies, not just for the development of AI, but how those societies are going to allocate energy, which is a scarce resource in Europe, including in my own state of Ireland. I mean, there's a very big debate about a large number of the corporations that are developing AI models have their European headquarters in Ireland, yet they're having considerable difficulty getting planning permission for data centres because of a shortage of energy. It's a big societal debate. Some people saying, well, we do need to prioritise this issue. Others saying, well, no, we don't. No, we shouldn't. We need to prioritise the needs of ordinary citizens and SMEs for energy use. So there's a lot of debate going to be had in the future in this regard.
All right, let's keep that debate going, and thank you for sharing your views, your information, and your intelligence on artificial intelligence.
Thanks very much, and I very much look forward to hearing much more about what the plans are in India, and also specifically in the digital news, how they're going to incorporate AI and what the plans are to do so responsibly and safely.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you.